From national speakers to local impact, Earlham College's presidential lecture series is bringing big conversations to Richmond, with recent guest Pete Buttigieg drawing more than 1,600 attendees. The series aims to spark healthy dialogue both on campus and across the community. Slow down and join us as we sit down with Earlham College's president, Paul Snigowski, to learn more.
Paul Snigowski, and I'm president of Earlham College and Earlham School of Religion.
I wanted to start with just talking about the presidential lecture series,
Yeah.
and what that is and what it means to Earlham.
Mhm. Well, this is a series that we run on an annual basis. And it's a way for Earlham to bring in speakers from really around the country and from a diverse set of viewpoints and cultural, backgrounds. Um, it's important both for our students and our faculty to engage with these people, but we think of it as a service to the community as well, that we bring such people here and can bring community members in to hear them speak and to ask them questions. And I think it's part of the purpose of a college or a university to do that for the community.
I was going to say, do you see that as a role
Yeah.
for Earlham?
Yeah. And we have a presidential lecture series, and then we have, I forget what it's called, the artist series or something like that. And so in general, we're going to try to bring probably two such speakers in, one in the fall, one in the spring.
Okay.
And these series are from endowed funds we have. And so, we're able to bring in speakers on that basis, and we get help from our alumni as well.
The presidential lecture series, how long has that been going on?
I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I've been here for not even 2 years. We did one last year. We did two this year. I know that they've been established, and Earlham had a reputation in the past for bringing in lots of speakers. The pandemic kind of knocked a hole in that for a while. And so we want to get back to a really regular cadence of doing that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so in February, you guys hosted Pete Buttigieg.
That's right.
Correct.
Pete was here in February, and then in October we had David Brooks, who
Right.
until recently was a conservative columnist at the New York Times. And Brooks brought in several hundred people to fill up Conard Auditorium. So, yeah.
How do you decide who you're going to host?
Oh, that's a great question. For those two speakers and for the one last year, which was Hannah Nicole Jones, we took suggestions from around campus in a sort of informal way. And then a group called the College Council, which is the vice presidents, the clerk of the faculty, the dean of the School of Religion, and me, that group sort of decided who we would like to invite. In the future, we're going to reestablish, it's a committee that used to exist, a faculty events and speakers committee that will bring suggestions to us in that way. But really, the final approval probably is the president's office.
Do you kind of make that decision, bring in someone who's kind of on the conservative side of the political spectrum and then?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I would say that we and I are very mindful of various kinds of diversity in bringing in speakers.
Okay.
And so, none of us, I think, is interested in bringing in those who would be provocateurs and would just bait and taunt the community or members of our community here on campus. On the other hand, a function of an institution of higher education is to bring ideas that are in disagreement out and have them and engage in dialogue about those ideas. And so we think it's really part of our mission to bring a responsible range of speakers, both in the political and cultural spectrum, to campus and to Richmond.
Why do you think that's your responsibility?
Because I think that's what higher education is about. I think higher education is about legitimate dialogue about ideas about which there is legitimate disagreement. Right? And so that means not having everyone here agree about everything and just be an echo chamber. It means surfacing disagreements, surfacing areas of contention, and talking about them. Um, and it's enormously stimulating to do that. And sometimes you find out stuff that you didn't think you would agree with, you do agree with, and so forth.
Can we touch on Pete Buttigieg
Hmm.
being here and what that visit was like for Earlham and the community?
Yeah, it was, well, I can only say what people told me. For me, it was a blast. You know, it was a privilege to be on stage to introduce this guy, and then a privilege to sit, you know, in a chair next to Pete and ask him questions. It felt a bit like, you know, playing tennis with somebody who's way better than you. It just elevates your game. And I think that visit elevated the mood on campus and the mood of those from Richmond and really from around the region, and some from the East Coast and the West Coast who visited for the event. They felt really satisfied at hearing this kind of dialogue on a college campus and hearing somebody, you know, be asked questions from the audience and so forth. So it was a big lift for all of us, and we were really happy with how well it went and delighted at the crowd and the buzz. You know, I walked into the room pretty close to the start of the event because we were having dinner, a group of us with Pete before. And when I walked in, I thought, oh my goodness, the gym is full. And you know, that buzz that you get from people talking and laughing and standing up to meet each other and all of that. It was really a fun event.
That had to make you feel good to see a room packed.
It was, yeah. Somebody told me, an older faculty member said, I haven't seen this many people gathered in one place on campus in quite a while.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Can you touch on some of the conversations that were had with Pete?
Yeah. Well, you know, in private, he and I talked about growing up in South Bend and about our two dads and about Notre Dame and so forth, where we both grew up. It was interesting at the dinner we had before the event, we had some faculty. And they were not all in political science. Two of them were. One of them was one of our physics profs, but they all were really keen on political discussions and especially sort of discussions of political philosophy. And they just lit up talking to Pete, and Pete knew exactly what they were talking about, had read all the stuff they were talking about. In fact, his father edited a famous book that one of them mentioned, and so it was, you know, it was great to see our faculty engaged in that way with the speaker. I just sat back and didn't say anything for the most part at dinner, so it was great.
And what was that like from your perspective to have someone from South Bend in this important
Yeah.
position now?
Well, of course, he kind of transcends South Bend now. And I had moved away from South Bend before Pete became mayor. But my folks who were then alive were still living in South Bend. And I heard all about it, you know, from them on the phone and in the national news. And then when he ran for president, he announced his candidacy in a building called the Century Center, which overlooks the river in downtown South Bend. At least I think that's where he did, and that was on the national news. And so it was, you know, it's truly exciting. Now, none of us knows whether he'll run again, but that was part of the buzz in the room when he was here was, you know, is this guy going to run for president again?
Mm.
Um, and I actually had a question to ask him about that. And his people said we shouldn't ask him now. And I can understand that.
Right.
He needs to choose his moment to announce that. And it won't be in Richmond, Indiana, at Earlham College. It'll be somewhere else, but still, everybody wants to know.
What kind of conversations besides that do you hope that this sparks having these prominent figures coming?
Yeah, yeah. I think for Pete and also for David Brooks, you know, there were surely people in the audience who didn't agree with everything Pete said, and I know there were people in the audience who didn't agree with everything David Brooks said that night or has said in the past. But there was sort of an example in the David Brooks interview of the kind of thing that that so to me represents true dialogue and what higher education is about. One of our faculty challenged David Brooks about his support for the Iraq War. And because David Brooks famously, and to disappointing some people, came down very strongly in favor. And Brooks gave a long and careful answer in which he said, I now regret that, and I see in retrospect that I was wrong. That's the kind of dialogue. I should let David Brooks speak for himself, but he's written about it as well. That's the kind of dialogue, the kind of careful examination of your own views and of other people's views, and the willingness to see things from different perspectives, that to me is just part of the heart of higher education. It's what we're trying to teach people to think that way, so that they then go out in the world and think with others that way.
Right.
And that in the end it's productive.
Do you feel that's your way of preparing students for leadership roles or something in public service?
Yeah, well, it's kind of an unattainable ideal, but it is the ideal. I mean, we really, I think, and I'm not a Quaker, but this is a Quaker-based institution, and one of the things that Quakers believe in is listening to many voices to come to a conclusion about something. And so I think it's not uniquely consonant with what we do here at Earlham, but it certainly is distinctively a thing that we aspire to here at Earlham.
Do you think that's like, is it a challenge that liberal arts colleges are facing when it comes to the political climate right now?
It
And
is.
yeah,
Yeah. It would be wrong to say otherwise. It is, and and it's a challenge at colleges of more conservative viewpoint as well. We live in a very polarized time, and we live in a time when there are events that people have, very strong feelings about. And one I, I'm dedicated and have said here on campus to the idea that people have the right to speak out here on campus about what they feel and what they think. As president, I am not going to come down on one side of an issue or another, because I feel that would stifle the dialogue that I want people to have on campus. And I think that's the right approach, to say, please have the dialogue. We're here to be a vessel for that dialogue, a place where you are safe having that dialogue, although not everybody feels safe about certain issues, and where ideally we will provide you with training that, really goes back thousands of years, the Greeks and so forth, into how to have such dialogues, how to examine things, how to think.
is that something you want people in the community to know? And do you think
For sure.
enough people know that?
I think that it's often not well understood about colleges and universities that that's really their ideal. And, it is true that most people who work at colleges and universities are of a more liberal political persuasion. But I bet if you asked most of them what's the ideal, they would say the ideal is dialogue. Even those with really strong viewpoints would say the ideal is dialogue. They would agree with that. And that ideal tends to get overshadowed sometimes by stronger voices and opinions than get expressed. But
Mm.
yeah,
How do you see Earlham's relationship with the community growing? Is having these series, these lecture series, is that part of that relationship?
yeah, I sure hope that that's the case. And, obviously it was hugely encouraging to have 1,600 people in the gym. And, we're working on speakers for next year. We hope we can get somebody with a similar kind of draw. But we're also involved in, we have a big Lilly grant for a project called Revitalize Richmond. And so we're involved in, partnerships in the community that are renovating buildings downtown on Main Street for apartments and so forth, and producing a multimodal pathway between Earlham and town, and renovating the gorge to be able to, you know, hike and do a zip line and canoe down the gorge and have it be a wonderful recreational space. So, I think that, well, for me, a kind of model of what might happen and should happen here in Richmond in partnership with Earlham is actually what happened in South Bend when Pete was mayor. Now, he did have Notre Dame, which is a lot bigger than Earlham and all the other colleges and universities in town here. But uh, the city of South Bend and Notre Dame partnered in a number of ways, and Pete was in the middle of that for part of the time. That kind of, repurposing the waterfront that they had there on the St. Joe River. Like a lot of Rust Belt towns, the town had been built with its back to the river, right? And then so they turned around and they said, now we're going to have apartments, and we're going to have what's called the East Race, which is a whitewater pathway around the dam for kayaks and canoes, a passageway. We're going to develop that into recreation. And that's exactly the sort of thing we're thinking about with Revitalize Richmond. When I first got here a year and a half ago, one of the things I found myself saying and going around to Kiwanis Club and things like that is, this is your campus, Richmond. Earlham is open to the public. Come walk the back campus. Come walk the campus itself and enjoy the atmosphere here. Come see a ball game. We have these beautiful stadiums for baseball and softball in back campus. This is all part of your community, and we want members of the community to be here in the same way that our students go out into Richmond. And as Main Street Richmond, as Revitalize takes place, Main Street Richmond is going to be more and more of an attractive area, I think, for Earlham folks too.
Was that a conversation that you had with Pete? I'm just curious.
We didn't have time to talk
More
about
time
that.
about
Yeah, it was,
Interesting.
we didn't really talk too much about that. But I may have said at one point, I may have drawn the comparison.
Yeah,
But that was quite a while ago
right.
for him.
Because I mean that's pretty incredible to see that,
Yeah.
to know that, that vision was there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and South Bend still has ways to go. I was just up there last spring. My sister still lives there. It's, when I was growing up there in the 60s and 70s, things were falling apart. And you don't get the feeling that things are falling apart anymore. You get the feeling that they're coming together.
Mm.
And I think that's the future for Richmond if we all can work together and, you know, um, but, I just want to be clear eyed about it. You have, tens of thousands of people coming to South Bend on fall weekends for football games.
Right. Right.
We don't have that here.
Right.
So,
Mm.
yeah, that influx of money and people
Yeah.
is a thing we don't have here.
Right. Can you touch on who you're on future plans and maybe who you
Yeah.
kind of have going forward?
Well, so there's not really a list of names kind of flying around right now. We already talked about wanting to get people from across the cultural and political spectrum. So that's definitely true. I mean, uh, it's not a given, but I was talking with some folks about, well, who might we bring in the fall? And so we had a woman, Nicole Hannah-Jones, and we had two men this year. So it seems to me we have to have a woman in the fall, a prominent woman, to come in and talk. Now, I can't guarantee that,
Right.
but that's the kind of thinking, that one does. You want to mix up that perspective. We have, I don't know, we're at least 50% female students on this campus. So we want to make sure that we're diverse in that way.
Is there anything else that you want people to know about Earlham going forward?
Well, we've been here for almost 180 years. And, one of the things I say when I'm out and about in meetings around town is, what's good for Richmond is what's good for Earlham and vice versa. And that gets to what we were talking about before, that it's just, I hope that people at Richmond will think of Earlham as not the only place. There's IU East, there's Ivy Tech, there are other colleges in town. But as one of those places where you can go to see a performance or see a talk or, just see a ball game, walk the campus, it's part of your town. Um, there's a little bit of a feeling that there's Earlham and then there's Richmond. And in reality, we're all part of the same community in some sense. And certainly I want people in Richmond to feel that this is their college, their famous old college that's been here for 180 years. And is a point of pride for Indiana in general. When you go around Indiana and you say, I'm at Earlham College, people go, oh, Earlham, that's a great old college. And so, I think Richmondites should maybe say to themselves, wow, we have this great old place that's still going. And where you can see people like Pete or David Brooks or whatever.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. And as always, you can find more stories just like this on thehometownheadlines.com. Stay kind, stay connected, and keep looking for good.